The following is a Shaw Public Affairs presentation.
Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Constituency Report. I'm your host Tracy Palazzari, and joining me today here in the studio is Douglas Horn. He is MLA for Coquitlam Burke Mountain. Welcome, Douglas. How are you?
Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. And since we last spoke, quite a bit of activity going on. Of course, we have a new premier, a leadership campaign that really brought a lot of new energy and excitement to the party.
We did, and British Columbians were looking for change, and we had some great candidates, 4 candidates in the end that were all very, very good. Christy Clark, our new premier, obviously came out victorious, and I think that's a great thing. It represents change for the province, change for our party, and overall, I think a really good future and a really good vision forward.
And part of that vision is what she calls a families first agenda. What does that mean exactly?
Yep. Well, it means obviously we make a lot of decisions here in Victoria, and in the decisions that we make, oftentimes we forget how that affects the average family, how that affects the budget when it comes to putting food on the table and paying for housing and paying for all of the other things that families have to do. So, one of the things that our new premier sees as very important, and I think our caucus in general sees as very important, is making certain that when we do make a decision, we take a look at how that affects families and how that really affects the bottom line in each family's budget.
Is that of particular importance in your riding? What's the makeup of your riding like?
Well, my riding is very diverse, and definitely, I think it affects every riding in British Columbia because, obviously the difficulty we all face as we move forward, we have the federal government, we have municipal governments, we have, a number of crown agencies, BC Ferries, BC Hydro, there's quite a few groups that tap into the pockets of British Columbians on a monthly basis. We really have to, take a look at a holistic approach and make sure that, we're all on the same page, and that basically, while we cut taxes, which our government has been very aggressive at doing over the last 10 years, that basically that money stays in the pockets of British Columbians, and it's not simply another agency taking that money back and putting it in the pockets of government another way.
Right. Well, one of the ways families are being supported is, of course, through our community gaming grants that support a number of organizations that support individuals and families. Recently, we heard about a $50 million boost to those groups. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic thing. Obviously, one of the difficulties with the turn down in the economy was trying to deal with the budget, and one of the things that unfortunately had to be done in order to keep us within fiscal restraint is we had to look at the gaming grants, and we had to move some of the money that had traditionally been going to community groups to pay for some of the things that we felt were important within the community, including the lunch program in schools and making sure that disadvantaged families, their children had lunch at schools. And but that left a huge gap in the gaming grant program, and none of us really felt that was a good thing. And so this last week, we announced that $15 additional million, which was a fantastic thing because it allowed me to make calls over the last number of days and weeks and basically tell people that there's an additional few $1,000s, especially to the PACs. And I think that was one of the really, good groups that the $15 million. And sometimes when we announce these things, one of the things that people don't realize is the consequences of them. They hear in the papers or they hear on the news, there's an additional $15 million, but no one really understands what that means for them. So when they get a call and they say, well, remember we announced $15 million for the gaming grant program. Well, that means that, you at Bramblewood School or you at Hampton or Walton or Nestor, schools in my riding, you're going to get an extra few $1,000s. And, the PACs really can put that to good use, and I think it's an excellent thing.
Yeah, they appear like small amounts, but they really do big things with those
very much
amounts.
So. Yeah.
Well, you actually had an opportunity to go on a ride-along with one group in your community, PoCoMo Youth Services. So what is this group doing in the community?
Well, Jerome, who runs this program, is just a fantastic person, and he really does care so deeply about our community. The program that he runs is just exceptional. Really what it does is it targets youth in our community that are out on the streets, and unfortunately looking for something to do often. And oftentimes when youth are out in the streets looking for something to do, the things that they decide perhaps aren't the best choices. And so what the bus does is it goes and provides support to these kids that are out in our community. And, so it's really sort of a fun thing. It provides them someone to talk to. It provides them, a little bit of counseling and that type of thing. But it's all done in a way that they don't sort of see it as counseling, because oftentimes young people, they don't want to sit down in a couch and be counseled. They want to have a bit of a chat. And that's really what this does. So when we were out there, I was amazed, because, we're talking about, being a few kilometers away from where I live, and, the things that you just don't see in your own communities. The people that are out there, I met a young boy who was like 13 years old, who'd been kicked out of his house, and obviously was having issues with his parents, but, had nowhere to go, and he's 13 years old. And so, things like that, we really need to provide support for people like that. So we provided a large gaming grant to PoCoMo of $45,000. And it's the first year that they've got that in a number of years. I was very supportive to make sure that happened. And, I think it's a great thing. And, there's lots of groups in our communities. There's lots of things that are happening. And, by spreading it around and making sure that each of these groups, get a little bit so that they can support the programs that are so important to our communities, I really think the overall program really is, provides so much good to the community and to the people that live there.
Yeah, and it must be great for you as an MLA to be able to experience the workers and the volunteers that make these programs possible as well.
Exactly. And they try so hard, and, just that little bit of support really makes a huge difference for them.
Well, another initiative involving local youth is called Pink Shirt Day. Tell us a bit about this.
Well, Pink Shirt Day is a day about anti-bullying, and really, bullying, we talk about it a lot, but, it's one of the things that we really don't think about all that much, when it comes to how to deal with it, and, how to talk to our kids, and basically how to, even in our own actions sometimes, making sure that, we're being respectful of others. And so, there's a day, Pink Shirt Day each year, which people talk about anti-bullying, people talk about being respectful to each other, and being nice. And really that's the important thing. It's about getting along with others, saying things that are nice. Often, the expression is there, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And, oftentimes people forget that. But, I think that's important. And, in how we deal with others and how we get along is really, really important. And that's really what it tries to put a focus on.
It's a great initiative in our schools, as is full-day kindergarten. And I've been hearing a lot of positive feedback from most of the MLAs we talk to on this show. Is that the same for your riding as well?
Well, I think people are really excited about it because, obviously, early childhood education is important. I sat on the Children and Youth Committee for many years now, and, time after time after time, people would come forward and say the importance of early childhood education and making, really getting people a good head start, and doing well in school right through to grade 12. And it's study after study has shown that if we get a good foundation built young, that our students will do much, much better as time goes on. So obviously we're moving to full-day kindergarten. About half the schools this year have full-day kindergarten. Next year it'll be all the schools that in the entire province. And so obviously we're gearing up for that. We have these there's module classrooms that are being put around in many of the schools in my riding and many of the schools around the province. And they're not the typical, people talk about module and they say, oh, they're just portables. Well, they're not really portables. Quite frankly, from some of the people that have seen them, they're actually nicer than many of the schools we have. They're very, very bright. They got huge skylights. They're very, very nice buildings inside, and they're great places to be and really comfortable. And I think people are really going to like them. Quite frankly, unfortunately, for many of the older schools, we have probably liked them too much. And, so, the difficulty is with some of the older buildings that, they just don't have the light. And, with some of the newer skills we build, obviously we have a lot more light. And I'm lucky in my riding because a lot of the schools are newer buildings and have a lot of natural light. And really, I think that's great for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes the school day better, for sure.
Exactly.
And as you touched on, full-day kindergarten is really about giving kids that fantastic start that will carry them through even into their high school, their post-secondary, and their working lives.
Exactly.
As well.
No, exactly. And having that good, strong foundation is very, very important. There's the number of studies, as I said, that talk about the importance of that. They talk about the importance of having an early start on education. And it's not necessarily, it's not about teaching math or spelling or that type of thing, but basically putting foundations in place so that people understand systems. And you can teach systems and the way to approach things in many different ways, and really that's what education is about all the way through. And people seem to lose sight of that from time to time, but obviously that's the most important part of it.
Yeah, well, families do seem very excited about that initiative, and also a boost to the minimum wage that we heard about recently. Tell us about
No,
those
obviously
changes.
that was one of the things that's been talked about for a long time. And one of the issues with the minimum wage is it's a balancing act between making certain that the economy and that the jobs are maintained, but obviously that the people that do make minimum wage have enough to live. And this is one of the things that going back to sort of many of the things, people lose sight that it's actually people we're talking about. We go statistically and we talk about what the average youth wage is, which is over $12. Or you take a look at our average wage in British Columbia, which is much higher than the minimum wage.
Right.
But there are 41,000 people that make the minimum wage. Now many of those people make tips and gratuities, and one of the things that the new minimum wage takes into account is that. So for restaurants that are paying the minimum wage, but people are making substantial tips, alcohol servers, their minimum wage isn't going to go up as much. But for people that are making the minimum wage and aren't making tips, those people, their wage is going to go from $8, which it is at now, to $10.25 by next May. And I think that's very important because obviously for those people, it's their livelihood, and we need to make sure. And I think over time we need to make sure that we monitor that more closely and more aggressively to make sure that those people that are at the lower end, are well taken care of. But it's not just the minimum wage too, though. It's other programs, and we need to, which is part of the Family First agenda, and what we're trying to do. We need to make sure that all people are taken care of, and really this is just the tip of the iceberg, but something that's very important.
Yeah, and even businesses were factored in. You mentioned that incremental increase to the minimum wage. That was really to sort of help the businesses
exactly.
adjust.
Yeah. No, we did a lot of consulting, and we talked to a lot of people about what would work for them, and because that's the big issue is we want to make sure that in increasing the minimum wage, the worst thing that we could do is have someone lose their job as a result of the fact that it's gone up.
Absolutely.
And those people obviously, they'd like the additional money. Their job itself is the most important thing to them. So we needed to make sure that the way that we did it had the least impact and really accomplished what we were trying to accomplish. So, by consulting with people, by talking to people, by listening to what they have to say, and then by making a decision and moving forward, which is really the change that I think that we're going to see with all of the things with our new Premier as we move forward. And I think it's a very good thing. And, one of the things that I think our new Premier represents is a generational change. And, it's a different way of looking at things. It's a different way of approaching things.
Right.
One of the things that I always have trouble with is, all of this sort of, political speak. I think we need to just be a little bit more blunt, and some things are good and some things are not so good, and when they're not so good, we need to say that that's what's happening, and I think that's the way we're going to see things as we move forward.
Yeah, and the public really does appreciate that.
I think they're tired of all of the spin, quite frankly.
Right. Okay, well, we will take a short break here on Constituency Report. We'll be back to finish our discussion with MLA Douglas Horne right after this. Welcome back to Constituency Report here on Shaw. I'm Tracy Palazzari, and we are joined today by Douglas Horn, the MLA for Coquitlam-Burke Mountain. And turning to some safety issues, we heard a group in your riding, or Clark Freightways, I should say, recently received a public safety award. Tell us a bit about what they were recognized for.
Well, this is a program that WorkSafe BC and the Trucking Association has put together, and Clark Freightways was the first group to receive this award. And I think it's a great thing because it does two things. One, it recognizes putting in place, strong health and safety programs. And, the trucking industry, if you take a look at their safety record, probably doesn't have one of the better ones.
Right.
But there are some companies like Clark Freightways who care deeply about the safety of their workers and making certain that they have programs and safety systems in place so that their workers are well taken care of. And what this does is it allows for Clark Freightways to receive this certificate of recognition, or CORE, and not only are they recognized as having these great, this great safety record, but also they get a discount on their WorkSafe BC premiums.
Oh, great!
So it's a win-win for everyone. Obviously, they're costing the system less because they care and they're making certain that the safety of their workers is paramount, and they get rewarded for that as well. So I think it's a great program. I understand there's a number of other trucking companies that obviously care similarly to Clark Freightways. Marcus Clark, this is a company that's been around for a long time, and it was actually very interesting to see. It was the pride in their operation was really evident as we walked around and saw the operation. And there's many other freight and trucking companies in British Columbia that I think care as deeply as they do, and so I think this program is a great one, and it saves money and really saves lives as well in the long run. Yeah,
that win-win that you mentioned, and providing that recognition, so hopefully it inspires other businesses to follow that same method. Let's chat a bit about the harmonized sales tax. We know a referendum is coming up, but some of the details we've learned recently about how it will be carried out. Explain that
obviously we're going to have a referendum on June the 24th, and we're going to basically have a mail-in ballot, which is going to save British Columbians millions of dollars. And I think with the consultations that we did, people get a little bit of election fatigue from time to time, and the cost of going to the polls, the cost of an election is huge. And while it's very important because in a democracy we want to make sure that the Parliament and the legislature and everyone else represents the will of the people and their choice. Obviously, the price of making certain that that happens can be high. And so this considerable savings allows the people to decide. Obviously, one of the things that we've done very, very poorly since the implementation of the HST is communicating with people as to what exactly it means. I think it's better now since it's been implemented, but people still don't understand. Before its implementation through a number of people that were obviously against the tax, many people were convinced this was a new 12% tax.
Right.
That basically they would be paying 12% more on everything, and there was a bunch of people running around telling everyone that, and it's just not true. This is a combination of the old PST and the GST, which were 7 and 5%, and 7 plus 5 equals 12, which is the HST. And so for 80% of the goods and services that people buy, there was really no change at all. And quite frankly, for those 80% of things, over time, they're likely to cost less than they would have if we'd kept the old PST system in place because of embedded PST level after level after level after level. And for business, small businesses, large businesses, all businesses, this is a huge advantage. I talked to a guy who basically is in the construction trades, and we talked about it, and he was going on about the difficulty. This was before it was introduced with having it, and that his customers wouldn't want it. And then it was introduced. He actually bought a new truck. He got $5,000 back in HST that he wouldn't have got back the PST before. So that was $5,000 that he got back in his pocket that he could put into his business, put into advertising. He's a real supporter of the HST now. And, I think once people understand it, a lot more than they do now. And this is the thing, this is really what we have to do over the next few months is not to sell the HST, but to make sure that people actually have the facts and make a decision based upon the facts rather than what they, the emotional feeling that they have right now. And
Right.
and I think once they make, they take a look at the facts, I think most people realize that the HST is much better than the old PST. And that's really the question, is whether we want to go back to the old PST system or whether we want to stay where we are. And the other thing people forget as well is from a province, from the provincial standpoint, we save $30 million a year in administration and not having to administer the PST anymore. So this is a huge savings to us, and allows us to put money into healthcare and education and other programs that I think British Columbians like a lot more than administering a tax program.
Yeah,
so it's an important thing, but people have a choice, and they'll be heard, and obviously we'll move forward based upon what the people of British Columbia think.
As you mentioned, education is such a huge component of this. We have the HST Information Office that's distributing information, other methods as well. Are you still fielding a lot of questions about it, getting out there and informing people? And
well, no, I don't get any questions about it anymore, but no, I am getting out there and talking about it because I think it's important. I think it's important to our economy. I think it's very important that we continue on this system because it makes us more competitive. It makes us so that we can compete against Alberta and other provinces, but it also makes us competitive against many other parts of the world, and especially in services. Before I was elected, I was involved in design, and quite frankly, even in the design business, I had to pay for computers, I had to pay for software, I had to pay for many things within my business that were PST, which I never got back. And this system makes every company in British Columbia more competitive and able to really compete on a global scale. Yeah,
and you mentioned taking those savings and being able to improve a different area of their business or do other things with that money, which is just great.
Yeah, no, very important.
Yeah, turning to transportation issues, how's construction going on our wonderful Port Mann Bridge project?
Well, it's ahead of schedule, which is nice, and it's amazing because once you start seeing things actually materializing, people get excited, and the two large pillars that'll be the support being for the bridge are now up in the middle of the river, and people can see them as they come by. There's still huge construction around the Cape Horn and all of the interchange there, and I think it'll be exciting once it's done. You take a look at it, obviously that's for years and years and years that's been a real bottleneck and a real cause of congestion for many of the people that live in my area. And with all of the new on-ramps and off-ramps and everything, it'll be fantastic once it's built. But obviously, until it's built, it's a little bit difficult. But, grin and bear it because it's going to be completed pretty soon.
Yeah. How significant is this going to be for congestion and traffic issues once it is complete?
Well, I think it's going to be huge. You're taking and almost doubling the number of lanes on the bridge. And so when you double the number of lanes on the bridge, obviously the congestion is, going to be mitigated substantially because of it. So, and when you take a look at the way that the traffic is being managed to get onto the bridge from our area, it's not simply one lane this way and one lane that way anymore. It's much better, and it's really going to play a significant role in making it much better for the future.
Absolutely, and ahead of schedule. Great
to
hear.
Yeah, no,
what about the Evergreen Line? Where are we at with that project?
Well, the Evergreen Line is obviously something that everyone, especially in my area, talks about. The provincial government, was asked originally by TransLink for a commitment to build the Evergreen Line, and we put forward the commitment that we were asked for, which was $400 million. Right. The federal government was also asked for TransLink for their commitment, which was a similar amount, a little bit over $400 million. TransLink then, after they got the commitment from the federal government to the provincial government that they asked for, then went back and said, but we don't have the money for our end, which is a bizarre way to do things when you ask for the money to begin with, and then say, well, I don't have my portion now that everyone else is at the table with theirs. So obviously this is something that goes back and forth, and it's at the Mayor's Council right now, and it's an issue. One of the things we really have to take a hard look. There's been a change at TransLink a number of years ago, and obviously that was because it wasn't working before. I'm not certain it's working now. The difficulty is we need to come up with a way to do this properly so that people have the transportation that they need in the GVRD, so that people in the GVRD are paying for it. One of the things when the province gives money, there's people in Prince George that are paying provincial taxes and corporate taxes. There's people in Prince Rupert and in Kelowna, and quite frankly, when someone in Kelowna pays their taxes, I'm I'm certain they're not saying, hey, let's build transportation in the GVRD. So that's why these things have to be a combination, obviously provincial money, federal money, but some local money as well. And how that local money comes about, and how basically the local municipalities and the GVRD collect that money is a question. And obviously we have to take a look at that and figure out how that money comes to the table, but there has to be a combination, and really that's what we're looking at right now.
And the demand for this project obviously very high in the community. Yeah,
well, I think one of the things that I think is good for the project, you take a look at the Canada Line and the huge success, their ridership is way ahead of where they thought it would be. And I think from a similar sense, in my area in Coquitlam, we have a huge immigrant population which is similar to Richmond, who I think with the transportation, with the SkyTrain or the Evergreen Line being built, would use it in a second. And we need to make sure that it's there so they can use it. I think the ridership will be ahead of what they think. The problem is, during the 1990s, we built the Millennium Line, which is really a line to nowhere. The line was supposed to service the Tri-Cities. It doesn't. If you take, it's a line that drives through a bunch of industrial parks in Burnaby. It's bizarre how anyone would have possibly thought that was a appropriate way to spend money. But people people want now to have where they live serviced. And the other thing that we need to look at with TransLink is parking. People need to be able to drive to SkyTrain. TransLink right now has this policy that people will just use transit and people will get on community shuttles and they'll drive to the SkyTrain. Well, the average person doesn't do that. The average person wants to drive to the SkyTrain, park their car, get on the SkyTrain, go where they're going, come back, get in their car and drive home. And if you make it difficult for people, if you make it inconvenient for people, they just won't use it. And so, one of the things that I think one of the successes that they've had with the Canada Line is there's a number of places where you can park. For example, the Riverwalk Casino. There are a lot of people that park there and then go into town. So, we need to look at these things more holistically and make sure that we're being convenient, that we're servicing people, and that we're servicing them the way they want to be serviced, not constantly telling them what's right for them.
Exactly, and getting them home as quick as possible to spend more time with their families.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the chat today. Douglas Horne, MLA for Coquitlam Burke Mountain, and if you'd like more information about some of the topics we've discussed in today's show, you can check out his website, www.douglashornemla.bc.ca. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back with more Constituency Report. We hope you'll join us next time.